All right, thanks and welcome back to the SKYLIT Books podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Austin. Today I'm going to be joined by Geoff Shackelford. Geoff is the author of 11 books, and his writing has also appeared in the Los Angeles Times, Sports Illustrated, Golf Magazine, Links, Golf Digest, Golf World, The Golfer, Golf Web, The Master Journal, Golf Course Architecture, Golf Week, Golf Digest Index, Golf Digest, Golf World, and Golf.com. He's here today with me discussing his latest golf architecture for normal people. Thanks so much for joining me, Geoff. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tyler. Yeah, I think even at least half of those publications are still in business too. It's quite humbling to hear some of those that I forgot that I've written for.
There were a couple that had RIP next to them, and I
Yeah,
figured, I'll leave that out.
yeah, I'll leave that out. Yeah, it's a
Don't bring
tough
it down.
business.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. And I was excited. We were just talking. I was excited to see golf architecture for normal people available at the store. And so I immediately snapped it up, and I think it's such a great idea because even if you're a golfer, maybe you don't want to necessarily be associated as not a normal person.
Right.
And you write about this in a very approachable way. So I guess I just wanted to go all the way back and sort of, if you're going to write a subject about, an entire book about a subject, and I think you've written several on this subject. Where did your obviously, where's your fascination with golf begin? I could see in the book, there's photos of you as a young man out on the course. You were indoctrinated very early into this world of golf. Where did you jump from golf into specifically being like, I want to study the architecture, I want to know what's behind the what's out there?
Well, yeah, I was one of those people, and like most people, and who get into golf, I tagged along with my dad and my granddad. And to me, that's usually the best way to get involved. And when you're a kid, you just want to drive the cart. And that's that, whatever, if it gets people out there, it's because it's such a weird, hard game, and you kind of need to find it. I don't know, accidentally, but you need to stumble on it or sort of ease into it, because it can be kind of overwhelming. And so it's kind of why I'm never a big fan of all these these initiatives that are trying a little too hard to grow the game, when we know it's one of those things where you just either are interested in it or you're not. And there are great stories of, there's a young woman on the LPGA tour who lives in India. Nobody in the family played golf, and they were having lunch across from a range, and she was just drawn to it. And so that's the case for most people. And I was one of those weird people too, who started drawing golf holes as a kid before I really played much. And for whatever reason, I still have them. I just started drawing holes, and then obviously I started playing a little bit more with tagging along more and playing, and it just kind of grew from there. But I always had a natural interest, or not natural, but just a mysterious interest in the course and the way it was designed, and sort of being an armchair architect and critic like a lot of people. And then when my dad he got a copy of George Thomas's book called Golf Architecture in America, which is just an amazing book. George Thomas, who I ended up writing a book about, and ended up working on the restoration of LA Country Club's North Course that he designed. Was kind of my that really got me going, because it's such a visual book, and there's so much to look at and think about. And if you're a kid, you're just kind of like, wow, look at all this. And so that really opened my eyes, and I just kind of went from there.
When you were a kid and you're getting interested in golf and kind of learning about golf architecture, and then obviously kind of move into studying that, what is it like taking the jump from studying that and reading a book about it and enjoying the visuals of it, to eventually getting out onto a course or to a plot of land and going like, okay, this is where everything should be. This is where it all is going to lay out.
Well, it's quite daunting, but really fun. I was really lucky because I had that privilege at Rustic Canyon here in Southern California, where I lived here, and Gil Hance was back east, so I got to do that a lot. But I come from a school of thinking, and this is from a lot of my research and reading, and I don't I left it out of this book because I didn't want to scare people off about some of the old debates they used to have, and I guess we still have in a way, of natural versus artificial. But it's really an important thing in golf architecture, because if you really respect the land, one, you're probably not going to mess it up on a real basic drainage level, but the water finds its way to move off the land, and a lot of golf architects screw it up that way. But most golfers really don't like it when somebody artificially messes with them and tries to build things that get in their way. But if you feel like, as a golfer, a hole is quirky, but you just feel like the person, well, they just worked with what was there, and it's natural, it's what Mother Nature created, then you embrace it. And sometimes they're ones that take a little longer to grow on you than others, like the old course, but in St. Andrews. But for the most part, it's a really important part of course design. And I come from the school of really respecting the land for a number of reasons, but ultimately from the golfer's point of view. And it's why somebody like Pete Dye offends a lot of people, because he really rearranges the land, and he doesn't try to mask what he's doing. It's in your face and over the top, and it's kind of fun. And you kind of know that going in, but sometimes, when they're not as famous as Pete Dye and people do that, they get annoyed by it. And so it was that was a fun thing for me to get to do. And there obviously were a few projects I worked on where the land wasn't quite so nice. And you just have no choice, but you should try to make things look as natural as you can. And I got a lot of that, obviously, playing George Thomas courses as well growing up. He and Billy Bell, who was kind of like his sidekick, was sort of a construction genius, and they really worked hard and they had really unusual sites here in LA to make it play like it was always there, essentially. And they just put grass on top of it.
And that, I think, it's fun, in reading this book and hearing you speak and some of your other writing. I now, I would say I was a normal person playing golf, and it is just that adds a whole other level of appreciation. And I think it's also just it makes golf and the idea of a golf course, which I think you're aware of, is like get bad raps from a certain group of people, from certain people who don't think they should exist,
right?
Which,
sure.
Fairly or unfairly. I mean, I get, but it's there's something about when it's natural and it fits the land that I think gives it such an argument, and it makes it feel like it becomes part of, it's not this monstrosity that's been rebuilt into this land that could have been something else, and also it makes it hopefully feel more a part of the community, which I think is something, I mean, obviously, I think you're very passionate about as well.
Oh, there's no question that some of the hostility toward golf comes from people seeing, just garishly ridiculous green and bright bunkers, and something that's just kind of an eyesore almost, in a way, to your sensibilities. If especially if you live here where water can be an issue. And so, yeah, and it's a constant battle for golf right now to change the perception of places that are green spaces in the middle of a city that actually really serve a great purpose, besides trees and grass and recreation and people enjoying themselves. And they're all very busy right now, and all of them are profitable, which hasn't always been the case. They're great places for wildlife, and we don't put as many horrible things on the courses like they used to. And so they're actually incredible stop-offs for migrating birds and all sorts of things like that. But there's no question that the artificial approach, and I think in some cases rightfully, has turned people off to what a golf course can do for its as you say, the community and the surrounding environment. And it's partly, I mean, I didn't want to go into that in the book too much, but these are all things that I think golfers sometimes forget about, and maybe it's not even their business to worry about. But I was trying to make it all a lot more approachable, and just to give you a few things to think about without it, overwhelming your game.
Right. Which, so I was just, that's just one of those things I think now as someone, if you're picking up the game in 2023, it's something you're going to uh, encounter, as sort of if you as you tell your people your friends who are non-golfers. I
Right.
think I've gotten that reaction around Los Angeles, and it's just you kind of have to. Again, we talked about before we started. What were you going to say there? I don't want to.
No, 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 no.
Oh,
Although
okay.
I
Oh,
will
sorry.
say I will say there has been a little bit of a perception change, but still have a ways to go, as evidenced by the fact here in our city we have, by my count, and I say city, let's go county. We have 5 courses seriously under threat, kind of out of nowhere. And it just, there's no question in my mind, it comes from people not understanding fully what a golf course does. In some of these cases, that it helps fund the maintenance of the parks and recreation, budgets and things like that. And so it is, yeah. I mean, it's definitely improved because golf's thriving right now, and there are more people who, like you, can kind of say, well, this is why I play, and people go, oh, well, it can't be too bad if a nice normal guy like you plays. But we still have some major things to overcome, because I mean, it's it's astonishing right now to me to have in LA this happening, knowing how much the game is actually kind of thriving at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are more people who I know and have met and have started playing in the last 3 years than I knew before, and basically my whole life, besides my father, uh,
Right.
who's been playing my whole life. I can't really, now I have a group of friends, a group of people who we play, and I was going to say it's something like where you go to, Los Angeles does have a network of city courses that are, inexpensive. Anyone can play. You can get on. There's no sort of perception, or there's no, it isn't it isn't country club golf out there,
Right.
and it's a lot of fun, and it's affordable for people. And I think that is kind of an important public service that's being provided to people.
Yeah. And it's just it's a weird uh situation in that a lot of the people in the game are members of clubs, and they're trying, but they're still kind of oblivious to this perception. And it's better, but when these things keep popping up like this, and it just makes me I just cringe, because it's once a golf course goes, you can't get it back. And it's always just unbelievable, some of the things that people think it should be instead of a golf course, and when soccer fields on the side of a hill. That was the proposal down at Goat Hill in San Diego, which was saved by John Ashworth and friends. And you're like, how? Well, you can't build soccer fields without completely just rearranging the earth here. This is insane, things like that. So, and the only thing that can explain that is just sort of just kind of a dislike for the game and the people who play it. And it's based on the elitist history of it, not common sense of going out to a place like that now and seeing who's out there, that it's kids, it's seniors, it's women. It's not a bunch of rich old white guys playing at the local muni. And so, yeah, the sport, it's still got a ways to go on that front, especially in our community.
Yeah. Well, so we'll move away from that into the actual game here, so I love the way you broke the book down into basically three big components of what a golf course should be, what you should be noticing, what you should be looking for. And you broke it down to the color red, which I do like that you specified is not your favorite color,
No.
as you were a UCLA. Now, I am drinking out of a UCLA grandmother cup, but I should mention that I'm only living with and dating a UCLA grad. I actually went to USC.
I'm only the child of UCLA graduates, so
Oh, there you go. Okay.
yeah, I went to Pepperdine, but also a blue,
Oh,
a shade of blue, yeah.
But so red, it breaks down to, as you kind of put it, do you remember the course? Would you want to play the course every day? And then one I think that would surprise a lot of people, which is it dog friendly? And I guess I would just was wondering if you could get into exactly what it is you're looking for when it's something that's memorable. What is it about a course? What does that mean to you? What makes a course memorable?
Yeah, well, when I started kind of reading about course design and learning about it, memorability was seen as sort of a shallow notion. And the idea with the book was to just have really simple questions to ask, but that when you break them down, actually really gets into some of the wonkier elements of a course design that the real geeks like me look at to kind of gauge whether a course is a great design and it's going to be something people want to play for a long time and well conceived. And so memorability was always seen as this sort of almost like, well, anybody can make a course memorable by having island greens and whatever. And you see how people do it on a now with when they can design a course for a simulator, they go totally over the top. Well, it's like a rock and roll album where if every song is just up tempo and in your face, eventually it all is a blur as well. And so I just have always, and thankfully George Thomas was one who preached memorability, because when you break it down, you can make things memorable without going over the top. And that's kind of, I think, the ultimate feature of the greatest courses that I've seen, that you may initially kind of think, yeah, they're all kind of the same. But then when you get into the details of each hole, I remember that because it's got that weird mound on the right, the green, and I got to be down the left side. So you can do it. You can achieve memorability without, railroad ties and water on every hole and stuff like that. So I think it's important too, because there have been a lot of places where, and I write about this in the book, you're driving out and you can't remember, like holes are already a blur right after you've played it. That is not a good sign. That is very bad. Now, a few weeks later, whatever, but right after, that tells you a lot. That tells you something they didn't put much into making a hole interesting. And I personally get kind of offended by that now, having done some design stuff. It's not that hard to map out all 18 and do things to try and differentiate. Yeah, especially if you have a course where the land is not that great, you still can do things within the design to give each hole a little bit of something that makes it stand out from the others.
Absolutely. I mean, it's amazing how quickly, when you play a course that kind of feels anonymous, how quickly it's just, you're looking at a scorecard and you're going, so what was this one? What was that one? And, and then when you play a course that is memorable, how indelible it becomes, just burned into your, and then I'll come home and you tell a person who's not all that interested and you're going hole by hole and you're like, no, it was great.
Yeah. And one of them,
not to go hole by hole.
No golfer should ever do that. And one of the big things that it speaks to is the routing, and routing's become, for people interested in architecture, like a buzzword to throw out that you've given it a lot of thought. And I kind of roll my eyes at it, at the idea that I didn't really like the routing, and I get into this in the book, and I defend why I don't. I think it's funny. It's kind of like when wine people talk about, oak and different things, because it is important that the routing is done right, but it's memorable because of the change of directions and the way it uses the land. Of course, back and forth is going to blur and just be a totally forgettable course, no matter what you try to do. That said, you just don't know what the architect faced. And so that's why I'm always reluctant to criticize the routing, because you don't know what restrictions they dealt with, either environmentally or by the client. You just don't know. And it's, unless you interview the person and break it all down. Well, a lot of these panelists and experts aren't doing that, and that's not really their job to try to track the person down. So I felt like memorability was a good way to evaluate whatever they ended up doing in the way of routing the holes without going completely bonkers trying to understand all the constraints.
Which and like even on some of the most famous courses in the world, right? I mean, you kind of mentioned the routing being such a like being at the whims of who's making these courses. You know, up in Spyglass or was it is it Pebble Beach where it was the owner had a very specific vision for yeah, Pebble Beach, right? Where the basically there was like they wanted a very specific hole out there.
Well, that happens a lot where people
Yeah, right. Of course. Yeah, but yeah, even
start
on
with
like the
a
most famous course in the
yeah,
world, right? It's like there's an
yeah.
owner who's like, it has to go like this. You know?
Yeah, actually, in Pebble's case, it was great because the owner really wanted. He knew you better have golf holes on the ocean.
Right.
Unfortunately, he had architects who they did a great job routing it, but the actual execution stunk, and they kind of redid it 10 years later, and made it into the Pebble Beach it became. But yeah, you just don't know, when what kind of things. I mean, I did a book on Cypress Point, and they wanted to build a hole on the ocean. That might be the one you're thinking of, and
Oh,
they the owner said, or the same guy who did Pebble Beach, Samuel Morse, said no, and I got to see all these letters back and forth, and it turned out just fine. So don't worry about the people of Cypress Point, but it would have been an amazing hole. But the 17-mile drive was a little bit more important, and I think it's all worked out pretty well. But yeah, you just never quite know. And sometimes people get very locked into well, it should be par 72. The ninth should return to the clubhouse, and all these kind of parameters. And most of the great courses actually don't follow much of a prescribed notion, other than being 18 holes and probably par 70 or higher.
So that's memorability, which is I think is very important. It obviously speaks to the course and again the way, like you said, the routing, the way it's laid out, and how playable it is. So or then how playable it is kind of the next thing is the test you have is, would you play it every day? Is it something that if you had the time, you had the money, you would go out and it's challenging, but also it's not insurmountable. And so, can kind of like what goes into that for you for an everyday course?
Yeah, when I started doing all this, the word fun was kind of a dirty word. I mean, when we opened Rustic Canyon, people would sort of condescendingly go, well, it's a fun course. And you're like, well, and Gil and I would be like, well, isn't that the whole point of playing? You're supposed to have fun. And thankfully the perception has changed. That was when, it was about like everybody tried to build something to host a tournament. And, a few courses right in the neighborhood by Rustic Canyon did that. And one's sort of whittled down to like 9 holes, I think, and a range, and the other one's completely abandoned and gone. And they weren't places you wanted to play very often, if ever. And so I've just always found myself through looking at courses through the years, asking that question of, is this a place I could play every day and enjoy it? Yeah. There's also the bucket list question that, if you had to pick one course to play the rest of your life, what would it be? And that's a great question too. I love that one, but it's a little different than what I'm trying to get at. Is it a course you could play every day and enjoy? And when you pose that question, when you look at some places, it actually starts to make it a little trickier matter, but then it speaks to fun and the kind of diversity of the holes and a little bit of the setting and I even caved a little bit, Tyler, in the book. Yeah, I've always tried to be one of those, don't judge the wine by the restaurant, separate the experience from the architecture. And I just have realized you can't do that. It's just impossible. And so if it's a place you go and you feel good going there and you like the vibe, don't try to fight that. That's just part of the question, because there are a lot of places that are really cool designs and they're not much fun to go to. And I didn't really want to cave on that, but I think it's just on that question, you're never going to be able to avoid that idea of that element, that little bit of bias. And sometimes, you know what, when you think about it, you go see a great film, and it's you want the movie going experience is part of the enjoyment of the film. Or you go to a great restaurant and everything around the actual thing that comes out on the plate from the chef it's important too. And so, yeah, obviously everybody has different tastes on, there are people who love these over the top experiences where there's a guy playing a piano on the range and they have pyramids of Titleists and it's over the top and people love that. And there are people who can't stand it and love going to the Muni and being with kind of regular folks and quirky swings and are more in their element there. And so, but the main question really does still stick to design. And is it a place that kind of piques your just interesting enough and fun enough without beating you up too much? That's ultimately kind of what the question gets at, which is a really important part of all the great courses through time, that they are challenging. Yeah, you'll hear the phrase. It's challenging but fair. Yeah, that's a little stuffy sounding, but it is essentially gets to the gist of the question, which is it tests you a little bit, but it lets you win a little bit sometimes too as a golfer.
I feel like, yeah, it really comes down to, some days you can win, some days the course will win out there. And that's always, it should be a struggle as opposed to sort of either hitting your head against a brick wall out there over and over again. I wanted to quickly say, and I love in the book as well, you use these kinds of metaphors and
probably dated myself quite a bit in a few of them, but Fleetwood Mac and 70s and 80s references.
They were pitched right at me. I think that's the culture I enjoy. So I was there with you. I was right there with you.
Thank you.
I think it's a great way to do it because it makes everything, obviously, like you say, it's about approaching a normal person and saying, look, you've been to the movies and you've considered that experience and you know what it is or you've been to a concert, and it's not that different than going to a golf course and understanding that there was time and effort and things put into this. And I think you communicate that so effectively. So I appreciate those references.
Well, golf courses are an artistic expression, and just the way a well thought out meal and restaurant is, or a film, or any of those things. And as you said, a concert. And so, I think people always lose sight of that fact that a golf course is generally attempted to be a work of art. Some are not, quite a few are not, but they are based on similar principles of that are important in other art forms, especially the ones that are a little more experiential, or where the experience can kind of surround what is being presented. And I always use the analogy, and I wear it out, but golf courses are the one. You can go to a museum and look at a beautiful landscape painting and enjoy it, but you can't step into that painting. And in a golf course, you can stand there and look at it, and then you can step into it and you go and take it on. And I think that's why it's such an amazing art form when it all comes together.
It's so right, because there's something so it's its own. It matches that kind of artistic impulse of someone, but it's certainly considering so much more, right? It is exactly. It's three-dimensional. You are in it. You are making choices. You're interacting with it on a moment by moment basis. And when something really works, you can feel it, and that's always. And again, I think I've said this earlier, but it's like that's what I loved about the book is just I know when I feel like a golf course is working, but I wasn't sure exactly what it was or why. But I was using similar language to describe why I love the course I play all the time. We talked about this right before we got on. Is I play Roosevelt, which is a city course up in Griffith Park, and I would always tell people it's like I love it. It's like you're hiking in Griffith Park.
Yeah.
Sort of realizing, they didn't really move the land around that much. You're in the side of the hill. You're going up hills. You're going down hills. It's a hike. It's a real hike, and that feels appropriate for where you are. And so now I feel like I can say, because they kept the land kind of what they had, and they worked with it. And there's trees, and it's you get beautiful views. It's being in Griffith Park, but you're playing golf.
Well, and that was the point of the book, was to be able to give you a few things to, questions to ask, and then just to help people understand a little bit better why they like a course or don't like a course. And I think everybody wants to be able to have that discussion. I mean, it's one of the fun things about golf, unlike tennis, where the court's the same every time. I mean, you're a little bit different surroundings or whatever, different fence, but golf courses, everyone's different. And I think, I know people are turned off sometimes by the way rankings work, or the people who talk course design, and myself, I plead guilty in the book to having done, and it can sound kind of condescending and hard to understand, and it really isn't. I mean, it really isn't. To make a course, to be able to understand why you like a place or not, it's really not. It comes down to some pretty basic things ultimately, and that was what I was trying to kind of weed through with this.
Absolutely. And so I think you did it, and at least again applying it on just a very simple, the course that I play, it's a 9-hole executive, but it's like it just hits it where everything of I remember that course so well. It's only 9 holes, so it makes it easier. But
Yeah.
each hole is sort of distinct, but interacts with each other, and they're on the land, and so it was very helpful in that way. And then to kind of transition into the last point that you make, I've also been out at Roosevelt Golf Course, and someone brings their dog with them, which is great, and I love
Cool.
that. And I think so there are people who bring who's a very quiet dog, isn't barking at anyone's backswing, but has a great time and walks around the course. And so your last point was, is it dog friendly? And you kind of get into the fact that there's this history of dogs in golf, and what that exactly means to you when you apply it to a modern course. So yeah, what do you mean by dog
Well,
friendly?
yeah, that was sort of the last question that I came to a few years ago, and it was I know exactly when it was. I went to the US Open at Erin Hills, which is just a massive place. And then the day after, I went to this super private, amazing course called Shore Acres in Chicago, and it is just such a cool course. It's so fun, and the superintendent's dog was just having a blast, and I was watching him and thinking, God, he couldn't do this at Erin Hills. He wouldn't. But it was more. It wasn't the question. Yeah, I mean, sure, I'd love to see more courses be welcoming to dogs, but ultimately the question was more about, because the first 2 questions don't really address some things that are pretty geeky, like the scale of the features, the scale of the property, sort of the natural beauty of it, the vibe, and even things really, really geeky stuff like drainage and kind of the feel underfoot when you walk, because you'll talk to people who will play something that's very natural, and there's always it's just a great walk. It's a great walk in the park. The green finishes, and there's just a nice walk to the next tee. And you'll hear people quite often, especially now that we've lengthened a bunch of courses, or, we've modern course design. The architects deal with a lot of liability situations, so that the walk and cart paths, you'll walk off a green, you cross a path, and you go, across the street and up a hill to get to the next tee. And it's like, well, this isn't a very enjoyable walk. I wouldn't want to, my dog and I wouldn't want to do this if we didn't have our clubs. So it ultimately got to, and drainage is a big thing of mine. Back to the conversation of natural versus artificial. A lot of architects now just do this awful stuff with drainage and catch basins, and they're muddy, and they just aren't any, there's divots all around them, and they're right in the middle of the fairway or by the green. And it's so lazy. It's lazy design. You should be, moving the water away, because you need drainage, but don't make it a feature of the course. So kind of all these geeky things kind of come together to me in that question, that just sort of that underfoot walk in the park thing. So, and it was fun for me to research a little bit about dogs and what they like, and I got into that a little bit in the book, and it is fascinating how many people I've heard from who really enjoyed that chapter and have stories to tell, either of their best golf is always played when they bring their dog, because they're just more focused on the dog, or they're relaxed, or whatever. It's been really fun to hear that, and more places are allowing people to bring a dog. It's weird. In Scotland, most of the courses either don't allow them or they require you to have them on a leash. And yet anybody can walk through a golf course taking their dog on a walk to the beach by law. So it's a weird thing. England, where you think they'd be real uptight and stuffy, some of the oldest clubs, just what you would think Sunningdale it just sounds so snooty. Total dog nuts there. They let the dogs go everywhere. The dogs have accounts at the snack bar. They know how to find balls. Everybody knows everybody's dog's name. And whenever people go there, and by the way, 2 amazing courses, but they just go, oh, it was just, the vibe was great. And they are places, the land is so beautiful. You'd love to just take the dog for a walk, even if you didn't have your clubs. But those places, you really want your clubs. So it kind of encompassed a few different things. And I was nervous about that chapter because I figured, oh, people are going to go, what the hell's he talking about? But it seems like it's come together pretty well. So now we just need more golf courses to be welcoming of dogs. I think it'd be pretty cool. And I have a list in the back of the book of ones that I researched and found were especially dog friendly.
Yeah, it's exactly.
And in terms of policy, by the way, not architecturally. Yeah. There is a difference.
Every course and everyone who works there should be dog friendly, but by policy to make sure they're allowed on.
And I get it. They're diggers and they're allowed dogs, but I think we know that superintendents now, almost every superintendent in the country seems to have a dog, either to herd Canada geese or to give them something to not want to jump off a bridge when they've been berated by the green chairman because the greens weren't 13 today on the step meter, and it's really been a cool trend, and they're often the most popular characters at a course now, the dog.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's exactly what you said. Because I went in wondering exactly how are you gonna kind of land the plane?
Yeah, how am I going to land this plane? Yeah,
yeah. What is that going to mean to people? And then you
got to have a little mystery in a book,
I was like, you know what? He did it. He
cool.
got there. And it's exactly what you said. It's right. Is it approachable? Is it walkable? Is the course right? If you weren't there with clubs, would you enjoy taking this walk with your dog?
Yeah.
Anyway, and that encompasses, again, maybe the nerdiest thing you get into in the whole thing, which is drainage, and you admit that in the book, and I appreciate you. But again, it's one of those things that I would never have really thought too much about it, except other that there's a time when you're on a course and then your golf ball lands in the middle of the fairway and you're in a drainage thing, and you go, well, this is just, I can't even enjoy it for a second.
Yeah,
I wanted to be in the middle of a beautiful,
and I want a flat stance, and I've got this weird. I mean, Pete Dye used to do it right, or he did it right up the middle of his fairways with these bowls, and you're like, you hit a perfect drive, and you got a funky, and it's artificial, and you go, well, you start thinking of Pete Dye instead of thinking about the shot to the green, and that's not to say I think unlevel lies are bad, but when they're artificial for this stupid reason of when they could have just moved the water a little more off to the side, it's annoying. It's an annoyance, and it's kind of lazy design to me. But I argued with him once about it, but obviously I didn't get very far. He's a great guy, by the way, super guy.
I imagine he's not going to have his mind changed about that stuff. That seems like he's locked in there.
He had a way of doing it, and God bless him, it worked. And he, by the way, he for all the artificiality of his courses, he really kind of was the person who awakened a lot of us to the importance of links golf and natural and quirk and short par fours and a whole bunch of really cool trends now in course design. All started with Pete Dye coming along and going, what is all this crap, and doing his own thing. So he's quite an amazing figure.
Yeah. It's so, it's interesting. Again, like the dog friendly aspect, it's so true too. Cause you even say you specifically, or it's like, what is it? I take my dog out and, he loves to be out on the street and see people and everything. But it's concrete, it's sidewalk. It's not fun. You take him out, and we've been lucky enough to take him to, there's a par 3 really near us as well, that, you go at the right time with the right guy working, you can get him out there and, you just watch his brain explode. He's just so excited to see all this grass and all this, he rolls and he's sniffing and he's in it. And the joy of that makes the whole thing better,
Yeah. Yeah, and I can't tell you, I mean, the book's only been out since June, and I've gotten probably already 5 or 6 things about that where people have just said, I didn't really realize it until but my best rounds are always when I can bring my dog, and
Yeah,
it makes sense, it makes sense.
it's fun. It makes it fun. Well, so and I want to, and I, not to take everything from the book, but you do include a great story about a dog named Nails, which is
Oh yeah.
I love that whole story. If you wanted to just if you could briefly.
Well, yeah, I tried in the without boring people too much, but I really did want to go back because one of the things I tried to do with this book was kind of set aside everything I had written about before and go back into the early history of the game and really figure out why golf survived and at the beginning, because the courses were not well maintained, and it was Scotland, and it was cold, and all these different things that it had going against it. And so I do have a chapter early in the book to kind of figure out what was it that made golf survive versus these other variations of the game, and I cover that. And then yeah, one of the most famous dogs in golf, or infamous, I guess, was Freddie Tate's dog Nails. He was this great amateur golfer who died in the war, but he was England's best golfer, period, amateur or pro, for a few years. And he was a beloved figure. His dad was a professor at the University in Edinburgh, and he was a big athletic guy, and hit the ball crazy distances. And everywhere he went, Nails went with him, and Nails could retrieve his balls, but he was kind of nasty. And there were some problems at a little terrier, and he could be a little nasty at times. But anyway, so I kind of relived that story just to remind people that there is a history of dogs in the game, and I don't know how many of the stories about him are true, but there's certainly quite a few that were well documented at the time that are pretty. A couple are kind of bring a tear to your eye when he died young, but he asked about him, like he got letters from Nails while he was off at the war, but on the golf course he was there, and obviously a big part of his life, and just a cool little, and I have never seen the painting because I've only been in the clubhouse at the RNA once, and it was on it was in store, or I think it was being restored or cleaned up. But in the RNA clubhouse at St. Andrews, there's a huge painting of Freddie Tate, which is actually in the book, and Nails. They were very kind to allow me to reproduce the painting in the book, which was neat of them.
As if I needed any more reason to go there. This was sort of my thought.
Yeah, St. Andrews it really is. The pilgrimage is, because it's not just the courses, it's the town. It's just an amazing town, and the people, and in Scotland, the golf towns, we were talking before we started recording, certain cities in the US, ours included, there are a lot of people who are hostile to golf, but in Scotland, the towns are connected to the courses, and
yeah,
you can walk down the street with your clubs and nobody hisses at you. They like you, and they welcome you. And there's something about that whole connection of the town to the course that you wish more developers in the US would try to capture. But usually it comes at the, they don't want to sacrifice some plots, or land planners just haven't been there, but it's magical. There's just nothing like it. And even when the weather's awful, or you don't really like links golf, or you think this course is goofy, you just feel special there. And it's an amazing place. And I've been lucky to go many times and never get tired of it.
Yeah. I mean, and it was interesting too, because I loved where you started the book in terms of just even, truly, how did this survive? How did this take off? How did because now it feels like we're, whenever you're in the present, you're sort of like, well, this is sort of, it was inevitable. It would get to, well manicured, beautiful courses in the middle of a desert or something,
right.
It doesn't really make sense. And then you look back at the origins and you just go, I mean, yeah, like, golfing was practically made illegal at a certain point, and people kept playing, and and they're playing 5 holes, not 18, all these things, and just the amazing evolution and how it continued to grow and explode, again at a point when like you've described in the book, it was practically outlawed is amazing.
Yeah, almost had no business surviving, really. So yeah, when you hear people today complain about certain things related to golf, and I didn't do the chapter to like guilt you into. I just wanted people to kind of think about, well, there must have been, well, what was it? What did it overcame all these things, and it was that it ultimately got to those questions of the holes made you want to come back and play them again, even if they were really quirky. Whereas these other games were more on a flat surface or reliant on lines and certain kinds of parameters and rules. And golf was a little bit different, and it survived when all these other basically stick and ball games did not. And the reason is ultimately the things that draw us to a course over and over again and make us enjoy coming back to them today.
There's nothing like a Scottish hillside, I think, is really
Yeah, well, you should see they don't have a lot of hills there, but the mounds they have are fantastic.
The mounds, exactly.
The bumps and the hollows, they're just incredible. They are, and they're shaped by water, so they're not shaped by man usually, and that's why they're so cool and why people tolerate them.
Yeah. And so just kind of you wrap the book up, and I wanted to kind of get with basically saying, I've given you all this information. Here's how it can kind of help your golf game, if you apply it, if you can try to apply it. And I think that was obviously an important sort of, I think everybody wants to read a golf book and get a kernel of something out of it.
Right.
Which I'll be honest with you, I just did over the week, on Monday, because I've been reading the book and rereading the book, and I caught you include all these great quotes in there from golf designers, golf players, and famous, Arnold Palmer. And I think it was the quote that it finally stuck to me of, go out to a green and you'll make good money as a gambler if you bet that every person would come up short of the hole, basically.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I'm taking an extra club length. I'm gonna get on the green. And it was the great tip of, there's not that much trouble behind usually.
Rarely.
It's a safe place to usually.
I think there's one or two greens at Roosevelt you don't want to go long, as I recall.
No, that is true. That is very true.
But yeah, and that was the publisher's idea, and I was really glad he pushed for it, because when I did a book called Grounds for Golf in 2003 that was a primer. And they really wanted stuff about how to read the course and get better. And I'm like, well, it's hard. Well, it shows you how much has changed in the 20 years since I did that book, because I get into all this and explain, but the ways you can scout out and research a course, obviously it can be a little dangerous. You could get carried away with it. But there's so much you can glean with a little bit of homework. And some of it, as I explained in there, because tour pros would mention looking at places all the time, and they would never really give me much of what they saw. And some of it was trying to keep a secret, because they all think they have the secret sauce. Some of it was just simply getting a lay of the land, and I initially thought, well, that's not that great. And then the more I realized, well, wait, you know what? Golf is so awkward and stressful when you go to a new place, and just kind of knowing where everything is one little thing that takes a little less worry out of your life, I guess, to put it in people probably don't play golf would laugh at that idea, but any golfer knows, it's just kind of nice to know everything is, and it just adds one little thing that's a little more comforting. And so I try to detail the ways you can use Google Earth to your advantage, and then also just in the pure look at the design kind of thing. I mean, you can misjudge a design from above too, especially one that's got a lot of cool stuff on the ground features, because obviously an aerial doesn't pick those up. But I really had fun writing those chapters, because it was like, okay, this is going to be interesting. And I'm very proud of kind of the way they came out, because I feel like I give some good advice without giving it too much, I guess. There is a fine line there, I think.
Definitely. I think it walks that line nicely. And, yeah, I mean, there's a point where, if you're in hour three of watching like drone footage of a course you're going to play, you've gone too far,
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
You're going a little deep. You've gone off the deep end, I think. Yeah.
yes, absolutely. But it's helpful, and it kind of, again, it also ties in nicely with, again, just understanding what's out there, and you kind of plant the seeds for that, I think, even throughout the book of, why is that bunker there?
Right.
Why is that specific thing there? And it's like, well, it could be for, multiple reasons. It could be things that just, it could be for something as simple as drainage, or it could be that, if you take the line over it and you carry it, and it pushes you just a little past where you're comfortable, and if you do it, you'll be rewarded. And then by knowing that, it gives you the confidence to either go for it or say, you know what, I know it's a worse line, but I know I'm not going to carry it, so I better go left and lay up short. And that's part of design, and that's part
Yeah.
of also solving the problem of a golf course, right? It is
Yeah.
a problem solving game on some level.
It is, even when you don't have full control over where the ball's
Yes.
going. Again, it's still nice to know when somebody tried to do these things to make the golf good, and because some people see a bunker and they think they're just trying to punish you and make you feel bad about yourself, and it's actually not the case. It's actually to give you something to overcome. I mean, I the one thing I guess I took away after doing this book was that I wish more architects, and we're in a great time right now. There's a lot of really good designers, but I do wish they'd let people win more, and give. I think the old architects are still so good and revered because they weren't quite as big a hurry. They didn't have a choice. They were building with more rudimentary things, and so they really agonized over the placement of things and little ground features, but they let you win. They didn't fight you. And sometimes the architects today fight you too much, and very few of us are good enough to win a lot. So they should let us, but golf has an inferiority complex where people, it's the way the game looks and is played. And so people who develop and design courses tend to try to maybe overcompensate for that a little and make courses too hard, because it is a fine line between fun and playable and interesting and hard, and finding that balance is it's not easy, but when it happens, when it all comes together, it's pretty fun to play those places.
Well, I'll wrap up with this, and I know it's kind of, you mentioned, again, having your bucket list courses. Is there one course now for you that if you could just play every day, that's the money's no object, as you say, you get on a private
Yeah.
jet, you get there, what is the course?
It's North Berwick in Scotland. I love Royal Dornoch. I love the old course, but North Berwick and it's been really fun in my time in the game. It's gone from being viewed as quirky and goofy to a lot of people's pick for that exact question, because it's beautiful, it's connected to the town, and then every hole is interesting and radically different than the previous one you played, and they're all fun and they're all very playable, but they are challenging, especially the wind can really get going there. I got to play it this summer, and it was howling. It was the most wind I've ever played it in, and it beat me down. I was about the eighth hole straight out into the wind. I had a great drive, and I just absolutely cold top the next one, and I was just shot. It just got me. But thankfully the rest of the way was downwind, and but it's just fun. You just would never tire of playing it, and you can remember all the holes months after you've played it. So it's definitely, and I think it's really cool to see how it's moved from this, goofy to revered course. It says it speaks a lot to the improved knowledge and spirit of the modern golfer, that people want fun more than they do just sheer difficulty. And so we need to kind of keep driving that point home, because it is supposed to be about fun.
Yeah, it's so important, and it's funny to think that hopefully, exactly that mindset will continue as more people get into it, who just realize, this should be a good time. This doesn't
Yeah,
need to be an insurmountable sort
exactly.
of climb.
Yeah.
Well, that's phenomenal. Thank you. I was going to say, yeah, that's the one thing. I want to go to Scotland so badly, but I feel like I need to go for a month just to hopefully find the good weather days. It does seem challenging at times.
Especially this year. They had a rough summer. I was there for what was I there for 12 days and it was absolutely gorgeous. We had one little stretch of rain at the beginning, and otherwise it was gorgeous. And on either side of when I was there, it's just been awful. So yeah, normally September is very underrated month there. And things aren't as expensive either. So if you go, that's the hot tip, is to go in September, and even into early October, you could still get pretty good weather. This year was just rough.
Just a little rough.
Yeah.
Well, Geoff, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. I mean, is there anything else you'd want to just kind of shout out quickly before we wrap up?
No, I just thank you guys for supporting authors, and really appreciate it. And I know how it is in the world of independent books, so I hope people go in and buy my book or any book there. It's great what you do, and really appreciate it. And I'm on the other side of town, so I don't get over to you guys as much as I'd like, but thank you so much for all the support.
All right, well, we appreciate it. And if you ever come over, let me know. We'll go hit Roosevelt afterwards.
Absolutely. I am long overdue to play there. It's been too many years.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you so much again, Geoff, and thanks everybody for listening. If you want to pick up Golf Architecture for Normal People, for the normal people in your life who like golf, you can come to 1818 North Vermont. It's going to be on display. So come by, ask me about it. We'll talk golf. I'll lead you to the book, and you can buy it either for yourself or for some that golfer in your life. Thanks so much, and have a great one. Thanks again.
Thanks, Tyler.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the SKYLIT Books podcast series. We hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to check out the book featured in this episode, or others, please visit skylitbooks.com. If you're in the Los Angeles area, stop by for one of our live in-person author events. You can find a calendar on our website. If you like this podcast, leave us a review. It really helps us out. Our music is by Duck the Piano Wire. Till next time.